How is transforming our health system like climbing a tall mountain? I'm Chad Swanson, and I'm an ER physician, and I'm on a journey to understand and transform our health system. Recently, I've been spending a fair amount of time on YouTube watching basketball videos and expeditions to Mount Everest. That's where my mind goes, and where I want to spend my time when I don't have when I just want something relaxing to do. I started thinking as I was watching these videos, what is so powerful about a sports team? What is it about being on a winning sports team that gathers so much attention and so much energy and so much momentum? So when I become a fan of a sports team, I think about it all the time, and I talk to people about it, and I read what people have to say about it, and I learn about the backstories. Similarly, with expeditions to Mount Everest and other tall mountains, there's so much sacrifice and so much energy that goes into it, so much detailed planning, so many resources. And I started thinking, how could we harness in health systems transformation, how could we harness whatever it is that gets people so excited and motivated and interested in sports and climbing tall mountains? And you might think of a successful business or a neighborhood that's rallied around a need in their neighborhood, or a family that's excited about a family vacation. All three of these, so sports teams, expeditions to tall mountains, and health systems, are examples of complex adaptive systems. That's a crucial point, because these systems have unique characteristics that I think we haven't adequately considered when we plan for and research and educate about health systems. I'm going to share 5 characteristics of complex adaptive systems and talk a little bit about what that means in a sports team or an expedition to a tall mountain, and then what are the implications for health systems transformation. First is the importance of a shared vision. So when a basketball team is organized, and when they practice, and when they play in the game, and when they decide on roles, and when they decide to hire new players or choose new players on their team, and the coach, every decision that goes into a basketball team, whether it be high school or college or professional levels, is committed relentlessly and uncompromisingly to the vision, and that's to win games. There are a number of other short-term goals, such as shooting foul shots or stealing the ball or dribbling well, that are important and that receive attention, but they pale in comparison to the end goal, which is to win games. So for example, if there's a player that's really good at stealing the ball, but she isn't very fast and always gets her shots blocked and misses her foul shots, then she's not likely to play, because she takes away from the team the larger goal, which is to win the game. Similarly, in expeditions to high mountains, the goal is very clear. It's to reach the top. And while it might be interesting to cross the river that helps you to get to base camp, or to stay warm throughout the first day of the expedition, those are pale in comparison, and the expedition would be considered a failure if those were the only goals. Now, this seems obvious, and yet in health systems transformation, the end goal, which I would argue is health and well-being for all at the lowest possible cost, or at least that should be the goal, is too often neglected or in the background or glossed over or mentioned occasionally. It's not a vision that consumes every member of the health system. And so that's a crucial property of complex adaptive systems that isn't adequately considered in health systems. The second principle I'd like to talk about is the importance of interactions and teamwork. So in a basketball team, one player might be the best, but if he or she doesn't share the ball or work together as a team or carry out the plays that were organized, then despite the individual's excellent attributes as a player, the team may not be as successful. Similarly, in an expedition to a tall mountain, if there's one individual that is in the best shape and has the best skills, but he's not collaborating with others and following the plans and the route that had been set forth and carrying their weight or learning to work with the Sherpas or whatever the case may be, then that expedition isn't going to be as successful. In health systems transformation, we often focus on an individual, whether it be a policymaker or a public health professional or a surgeon or a nurse, and his or her capabilities. And we often focus on one specialty or a clinical interaction or a class that's taught without adequate consideration of the interactions over time of those professionals. So health is a journey that happens over time. It's not just a collection of isolated episodes. So I'd like to pause now and just share a few of the news articles and stories and other interesting things that I've been reading. So I've been exposed and been thinking about the importance of light for our sleep. So the importance of making our rooms completely dark when we go to bed and exposing our eyes to bright light right when we wake up. Dr. Gooby is a neurosurgeon that recently quit his practice to focus on overall health and wellness and being in the outdoors. He asked a question in a recent video that I'll place a link to, whether others should drop out like he did. And he said, no, not necessarily. And that got me thinking, in health systems transformation, there are a variety of diverse ways that we can deal with faulty systems. Occasionally, it's the most effective leverage point to drop out and focus on something else, or so that your story can be an inspiration for others. Other times, it's best to work just outside of a subsystem or system and try to influence it. And then other times, of course, it's best to work within the system and try to transform it there. The most important thing, regardless of the approach, is that there's this shared vision, this unifying force of health and well-being for all at the lowest possible cost. I've also spent some time in the last few days. We went to some friend's house that we hadn't seen in several years and just helped with some gardening. That was nice just to be outside, to connect with others. And it reminded me of the importance for our health and well-being of being outside, of physical activity, and also connecting with others. And then finally, I spent some time with my family up in the canyon, and that was also a nice reminder for me. So a shared vision is one principle or one topic within, or one characteristic of complex adaptive systems that's important. A second is the importance of interactions or relationships. And the third is this idea of emergence. So within a group of people that are diverse, that are interacting over time, that have a shared vision, there will often be surprising examples of order that will come up from the bottom up that weren't planned from a central force. So this characteristic of complex adaptive systems, as I understand it, is emergence. And so if we think perhaps of a basketball team, and there might be a player, and there might be two players that on their own might not be the best players, but when they play together, they're really good at the pick and roll or a different play that makes their interactions greater than the sum of their individual parts. And so that's an example of emergence. perhaps with mountaineering expeditions. Sherpas are the local guides in the Nepalese mountains. And from a Western perspective, at least, with a vision of climbing and climbing these tall mountains, within that framework, the role of the Sherpas might not be appreciated much, and yet they end up being the most important and could be the most celebrated part of that team, and that could also be an emergent phenomenon. Finally, in health systems transformation, a few examples could be in a medical clinic, a gossip that's shared, so a small incidence that can then relate in a larger disruption of the culture of the health clinic, or an unexpected political victory that can result in a new policy within health, or a new class that begins from an adjunct professor that could then introduce novel ideas into a department in a university. So the fourth characteristic of complex adaptive systems is the importance of narratives or stories. We as human beings are storied creatures. The way we think and make sense of the world is through stories, the way we're motivated. And as I think about basketball teams or mountain expeditions, there are people and how they arrived at their situation and the obstacles that they had to overcome. Those stick in our minds and they stir our souls and they motivate us, and we relate to the stories, and that gets us motivated. So I think with health systems transformation, we need to identify new heroes, people that might not have been appreciated before, people from disadvantaged situations and experiences, people that have advocated for and mobilized and lifted communities and introduced ideas and activities that increase the health and well-being for all at the lowest possible cost. We need to identify those people, describe their stories, and celebrate them more. And finally, the fifth characteristic of complex adaptive systems that I think is applicable to health systems transformation is adaptation. So complex adaptive systems can be contrasted with mechanical systems, for example, an engine. So in a mechanical system, there are a variety of parts, sometimes hundreds or thousands of parts, but they're always all the same and they don't change. So the screws and the pistons and the other parts of an engine don't change over time, and they continue working as long as we have a detailed plan, we can make and fix and recreate that system. Within complex adaptive social systems like basketball teams or mountain expeditions or health systems transformation, human beings adapt over time to their situations. So there might be a player on a basketball team that gets hurt, and then that player needs to be replaced. There might be a new rule that needs to be understood. Within health systems transformation, many of the institutions, so the roles and organizations and institutions that we take for granted, whether it be licensing requirements or the goal of the system or financial reimbursement and rewards and a number of others, most of those originated in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and we haven't adequately adapted over time, despite the fact that everything in our environment, from the internet to our knowledge base to the disease burden that we're dealing with, to the emergence of other professionals like respiratory therapists and physician associates and others, despite all of these changes, our institutions have largely remained the same. So from a complex adaptive systems perspective, I contend that we need to adapt more, and we need to be open to much more innovation, and we need to evolve with other systems, co-evolve with other systems. I'd love to know your thoughts on the similarities and the differences between complex adaptive systems like sports teams or climbing a mountain or families or businesses and health systems transformation. What can we learn from these other systems? By the way, I'll be making these videos on a daily basis. My goal is to engage in an informal conversation with the world. So I'd love your input. I'd love if you would recommend other questions that I can answer. And I look forward to engaging with you. Thank you.